Ramesh Srinivasan is a professor of information studies and design media arts at UCLA. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ramesh.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Anna.
So over the weekend, I was watching some of your lectures and they're incredible. They're available on YouTube and I highly recommend everyone check it out because it'll help, kind of give you a good foundation for what we're gonna discuss today. But I wanna start off with the issue of inherent biases because that of course exists in society. We all have inherent biases that might be subconscious. We might be, carrying out certain activities that make their way into the coding for some of the tech that we're seeing today. And I want you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we know for sure is not only that our world is biased, but that implicit bias, right? Like that all of us carry around in our heads some form of implicit bias. And that's partly because we were raised a certain way, or we come from certain families, or have certain backgrounds, right? And we know there's enough science out there, and it's really been validated, that shows that at the minimum, all human beings carry with them some ideas of bias in their minds, and they may not even consciously know that. But here's the issue, right? So when we have power to create something, right? Like I write a story, I write, like a journalistic article, but also when I create technology, I always create that technology based on who I am. And who I am might not be completely apparent to you, might not even be completely apparent in a full way to my wife or my partner Shama, but it's actually something that I reveal through what I create. So that's why when we create technology, which almost everyone thinks of as neutral or efficient or innovative or cutting edge, right? Actually, what I'm doing is embedding my biases into the code itself. And the problem there is as those biases become part of the technologies that are increasingly taking over everything and anything in our world, those biases become normalized and everybody treats them as neutral. And then we see these incredible problems emerge as our biases, as elite engineers, end up creating the technologies that shape everything and anything, really.
It's so fascinating because I see these biases enter into or translate into coding in multiple ways. So on one hand, you have the coders themselves who might have some of these biases that they're completely unaware of. Yeah. And then at the same time, there is the issue of how some intelligence is gathered. That intelligence is gathered through the way we behave publicly, right? And you spoke about that in one of your lectures. Can you talk about that a little more here?
Yeah, so the way we actually learn, these technologies learn from us is partly like we create the technologies and we write software, for example, to learn from phenomena that the software might observe, right? So, as a man, I might be training my system to look at activities that I think of as normal activities as a man. So that's that implicit bias showing up there again, right? And what's really prominent here is that a lot of engineers and developers think that what we're building when we're building technology is just engineering, right? It's just neutral, it's just natural, it's just efficient. But moreover, what's really, really powerful is the technologies increasingly are learning from the world. But what is that world they're learning from? Well, it's a world that's full of biases, right? So when I'm an engineer and I'm trying to create a technology that learns from something like, say, the insurance claims or policing claims or the world and crime as it is, it's actually going to learn from the biases of that world. So if I feed data to those systems that learn from that data, and that data is already biased and I'm biased, what do you think is going to happen, right?
Right.
And we see that in Silicon Valley with executives and investors and even engineers themselves, dominantly male, right? There are stereotypes that are rampant that a lot of people actually believe that men are better at science and engineering. And now we're creating automated systems that actually replicate those biases themselves. So these executives, these investors who have such power over our future and actually our present, as I'm going to share with you today, are actually in many cases representing the top 0.001% of our world. White, male, elite educated, top economic class gazillionaires, right? And so the problem is those people, even if they have good intentions, who knows? are actually going to create biases throughout our world and make our world even more unequal.
And we're already seeing how some of those biases in tech have transferred into certain software or certain programs that continue to exacerbate these biases. So I want to bring up a few examples, and then I want you to fill in the blanks, because I didn't even know these technologies existed, and they're deeply problematic. So for instance, in St. Petersburg, Russia, there was something known as FaceApp.
Right.
You talked about it in your lecture, and they actually ended up apologizing for a feature in that app. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that was, do you remember like Hot or Not, like back in the day?
Yeah.
This was like something that Mark Zuckerberg was actually playing with back in the day. It was this idea, you know, sort of seemingly innocent, but actually very pernicious and harmful of it's an application that was developed in Russia where it would go around the internet and take people's faces and make their faces look more beautiful, right? But we know beauty is often based on bias, and we know that beauty in many cases in the world represents racist histories, right? That have come home to roost in many cases. And so what it actually ended up doing was taking President Obama's face and making it look not just more white, but also younger, right? So in so doing, the technology that we all thought would be just sort of neutral and efficient and whatever actually turned out to be ageist and also possibly racist.
Super interesting. And then there was one other development that I want you to just quickly talk about, and that's Compass by North Point. And I think that this is even more problematic because of the biases that it relies on in order to sentence certain individuals.
Yeah, so what this is a system that was being deployed in Florida and to some extent also here in California in Napa County. And it's a system that is sort of like Minority Report. It was looking at the files of different people who had been apprehended for various types of criminal activity, simple stuff even like shoplifting, and it would like analyze the arrest file and would analyze data about that individual and make scores, kind of come out with like clean, neutral looking, neat looking scores that actually would make predictions on the likelihood of committing a future crime. Remember that Future Crimes Institute in Minority Report? But what we saw happening is that black and brown people who had perhaps only misdemeanor arrests were being scored with a higher likelihood of creating a future crime than white people who had possibly felony convictions in their records.
Right, so you have the white defendants, or at this point they've been convicted, they're awaiting sentencing. And even if their crimes were more severe than the black individuals who were convicted for or found guilty of a simple misdemeanor, the technology, because of the biases that had translated into the coding, would say that the black defendants are 2 times more likely to commit the crime again, right?
And a judge in Napa County actually said someone who is white could have molested a child for every day and come out by the scoring system as low risk, not high risk.
It's terrifying.
And so those scores are being used to influence judging decisions on courtroom sentencing.
And it's happening right now.
That's right, it's happening right now. And the thing is, these systems are being embedded in institutions, so we don't even know when we're engaging with those systems as the public. So that's the part that's particularly worrisome. We just think we're like in a courtroom, but what's the courtroom using? It's using biased technology. And so I actually get in arguments sometimes with people about this because they say, hey, that's better than humans that are biased. But that's the wrong question to ask. The question that we should be asking and answering is, what kind of technologies do we want that take people who are vulnerable and marginalized and truly fight for justice and equity for those people? We have to build the digital world in that way.
Did you know that TYT Network is now available on YouTube's new streaming platform, YouTube TV? Get access to full TYT episodes and exclusive shows by signing up for YouTube TV today. All new subscribers get a 7-day free trial, so head over to youtube.tv and search for the TYT Network channel.